What's up guys, welcome to your Heroclix headquarters. In this video we're going to be discussing some of the basic team building tips and tricks to help you guys get started. So if you're a newer player, this is definitely the video for you. Even if you're a more intermediate player, you might stick around and learn a thing or two. But if you're a more advanced player, I would ask that you leave your favorite team building tips and tricks in the comments and help us all out a little bit. Now in this video I wanted to cover three main topics of the best support powers you should be using, how to pick out a good attacker, and then finally the three main basic types of teams to get started building and trying out. So to start off with, you should ask yourself, does your team pop? And what do I mean by that? Does your team have Perplex, Outwit, and Probability Control? These are the three best and most useful support powers in the game. So to start with, we'll take a look at Perplex. Perplex, of course, lets you modify a stat by plus or minus 1 on any character within your range and line of fire. So of course, being able to up your speed or your range is going to help give you that extra reach to hit a character you might not have been able to. Upping your attack so that you have better odds of hitting with that attack is always going to be helpful. And then even upping your defense so that it's harder for your opponents to hit you is also going to be extremely useful. Or even if you only needed to deal maybe one more click of damage to finish a character off, using that Perplex on damage just to get that kill shot you need will also prove very useful. So there's really a million things you can do with Perplex. You know, maybe even perplexing down your opponent's defense so that it's easier for all of your characters to hit them that turn will be better for you than just perplexing up one character's attack. So since it is a stat modifier, sometimes I like to bring more than one Perplex, having 2 or 3 Perplexers on your team to increase, you know, your attack and your damage output, or maybe doubling up on your defense so it's even harder for your opponent to hit you. There's a million different strategies you could come up with on the fly for using Perplex to help out your team. The second one I want to go over is Outwit. Outwit is of course going to be useful because it can turn off your opponent's powers, saying they can't use a standard power or one of their special powers on their card. It's going to have numerous applications, turning off their defense power so that your damage can get through. It's of course one of the main ones, but even turning off their charge so they can't get to you with an attack, or their willpower so that they would have to decide if they want to take that pushing damage to make an action next turn. Maybe turning off their penetrating blast so they can't shoot through your defenses. There's a million different uses for Outwit, so of course you're going to probably find it very useful to have on your team. And the third one I want to talk about is Probability Control. Being able to re-roll an attack or a breakaway roll within that character's range and line of fire is huge, because even if you perplex your attack up +3 and you have a 15 attack and you only need to not critically miss to hit their defense, guess what? Sometimes you can still roll a 2, and it sucks, but it happens, and that's why you need Probability Control, because re-rolling it, even if you miss again, at least you might not critically miss. And again, to re-roll your opponent's attacks so that they don't hit you as often is going to help all of your characters survive. Even using it for a breakaway roll that might be super important at that particular moment to attack a more important target can also have its uses. And just like Perplex, I like to bring multiple probability controls on a team, because having 2 or 3 rerolls of your attack is going to make your odds of hitting go up even more, just like it's going to make your opponent's odds of hitting go down even more. Plus, having multiple uses of all of these powers on multiple support characters on your team is going to help you in the way that even if your opponent was to knock out one of your characters, you still have others that can use it, so you don't have to be too worried if they knock out your only support character. You'll still have options on your team. And now there are other good support powers that we could talk about. Leadership, helping out your action economy. Telekinesis, helping you place your characters. There's plenty of great support powers, but Perplex, Outwit, and Probability Control are really the main 3 that I would say you have to include on any good Heroclix team. Even if you can't manage to squeeze all of them in, at least 2 minimum I would suggest. Now if you're playing a named theme team, you can get access to theme team probability control, which is going to let you give one of your characters an action token to use probability control. Up to 1 per character on your team, maximum of 5. And sometimes those 5 probability controls can be all you really need on a team. So if you're playing a named theme team, I would suggest trying to at least include Perplex and Outwit, and then maybe having your lower point support characters be what I like to call your designated theme team probability controllers, which is going to be, of course, the character that you're first going to want to give an action token to use that theme team prob, which is just going to be better for you than having to give it to one of your main attackers. And speaking of main attackers, that's going to bring us to the second part of this video. You can have all the support powers in the world, but you're going to have good attackers to actually KO your opponent's figures to win you games. So let's start with the stats. An average character is going to have about a 10 attack and 17 defense. So for your main attackers, you're going to want to look for at least an 11 or better attack. Now you might not know this, but since in this game we use 2d6 rolls, the average roll you're going to find with 2d6 is going to be a 7. So let's say if you had a 10 attack trying to hit a 17 defense, having to roll that 7 is going to be about a 50% odds of hitting or missing. So having an 11 or better attack is of course going to give you better than 50% odds of hitting, which is obviously what you're going to want to look for. And then of course having an 18 or better defense is also going to be what you're going to need, because you need your character to be able to survive being attacked if they're your main attacker. So having an 18 or better defense, of course, is going to make it much harder for your opponent to hit you. As far as damage goes, you're going to want a minimum of 3 damage. Now, why is that? Because if you look at the best damage-reducing powers in the game, Invulnerability, Impervious, and Invincible, they all reduce damage by at least 2. So if you have a 3 or more damage, you're going to be able to get through those stronger damage-reducing powers. I would recommend looking for characters with at least 4 damage. 4 damage is just going to be more solid for a main attacker overall, because again, their main role is KOing your opponent's figures, so the higher attack and damage, the better. Now as for the main power combos you're going to want to look for in your main attackers, of course they're going to need the ability to move and attack in the same turn. So you're going to look for characters that have running shot, charge, or hypersonic speed to be your main attackers, which is of course going to let them be able to move half their movement and then make a ranged action or a close action respectively. If you have hypersonic speed, you will be able to move up to your full movement and make a close or ranged attack with half your range, which could give you more reach and also lets you be able to move after the attack, whatever your remaining speed value is. The only downside to hypersonic speed being that it doesn't combo with as many powers as charge and running shot do. So if your main character has running shot, the best power to combo that with is going to be Pulse Wave. Pulse Wave is of course one of the most powerful powers in the game. It ignores everything within half your range, so that's going to get through any type of power that they might have for defense, even if they have super sensitive shape change, impervious, energy shield deflection, stealth, all of it at the same time. It doesn't matter, it's going to get through anything that your opponent has. But there's not a lot of running shot pulse waivers in the game, so one of my personal favorites is Penetrating Blast, just to be able to get through those heavy damage reducers. Not invincible, sadly, but still gets you through impervious and invulnerability just as good. Energy Explosion can be another good one, but I would only suggest that if your character has 2 or 3 targets so that they can spread a lot of damage out to your opponent's team. But now if you're using a more close combat oriented team and your main attacker has charge, again I like Exploit Weakness because it's going to give you that penetrating damage. Quake can be good, like Energy Explosion, because you can hit multiple characters at once. But my personal favorite combo with charge is going to be Flurry. They are both movement powers, but there are plenty of characters that have them both as a special power, or maybe you can give them Flurry with an equipment object, or however. but being able to charge and then make 2 close attacks can be extremely powerful. Gives you better odds. It's almost like having a probability control. If you miss 1 attack, you can still have a second shot. You can potentially hit 2 different opposing characters if you needed to, or just doubling your damage on 1 character to really help you finish that 1 character off in 1 turn. Blades, Claws, Fangs can also be a useful power to combo with either Flurry or Exploit Weakness. You can't combo it with both of them, but one or the other to get that penetrating Blades, Claws roll can be really strong, or to make 2 attacks and hopefully make 2 good Blades rolls, have that potential of dealing like 12 damage off of 1 action is insane. And Precision Strike is also a great power. It combos with Hypersonic Speed because it can go off of any attack. It's also going to be great for either running shot or charge. It's just a good power all around. You know, it makes it harder for your opponent to roll super senses, and it makes it so you're going to do a minimum of 1 damage through any damage reducer. So Precision Strike is definitely another good one. But then of course you're going to want that character to also be well defended, having a good damage reducer, or maybe super senses and shape change to give them a double rollout. Maybe they have like traded stealth and combat reflexes. Just generally being well defended, because like I said, this is going to be your main attacker. It's just as important that they stay well defended as it is that they can deal the damage to your opposing characters. Because obviously you're not going to want to lose your main attacker. Alright, so now that we have a good idea of what we're looking for in our main attackers, as well as the main types of support powers we're going to want to add on our team, now I want to talk to you guys about the 3 main types of teams. Now in this game there's billions of different types of teams you could come up with, but these are going to be the 3 main types of teams, just to give you guys an idea of what the kind of basic team builds are, so you can kind of test those out and see what works best for you, and then you can kind of build off of that and grow your own personal type of team builds after you've found what works best for you personally. So the first type of team I want to talk about is going to be a tentpole style team. What that means is you're going to have 1 main attacker that's going to be approximately half your team build. So in like a regular 300 point game, it's going to be about 150 points, give or take. And then you're going to have several support characters to, you know, perplex up his stats and give him those prob controls, maybe some leadership or some TK to get him out there. Just lots of support characters to help him out. And maybe like 1 or 2 little secondary attackers, just so that if he does go down, you have a secondary backup attacker in his place. And that character's main job is also going to be to come in after he's hit for a lot of damage and just kind of do a finishing strike to confirm the kill on certain characters. So that's really a basic and more well-rounded type of team. The second type of team I want to talk about is going to be a swarm team. So what do I mean by swarm team? That's going to be a team that has just a bunch of low point characters. You know, I'm talking about like 50 points or less mainly. So you might not really have 1 main attacker, you might have like several secondary attacker type characters, and also having several supporting characters to help them all out. I definitely recommend bringing a lot of leadership to a team like this to increase your action total. So this type of team can be very powerful, having multiple things you could do in a turn, having several options for how to deal with different types of threats. But it can also be more difficult for a newer player. Having so many more characters and so much more to keep track of can make it a lot easier for you to forget something, like maybe forget to roll for leadership on this guy, forget that that person had outwit, you know, just so much going on that for a newer player is going to be a lot more difficult to keep track of. Once you've gotten a little bit more experience, it can be a very powerful team, and is going to be extremely effective against the last type of team I wanted to talk about, which is a one-man army type of team. It pretty much is in the name there. You're going to have really just 1 character. So in a 300 point game, we're talking about at least maybe a 250 point character, and then having like maybe 1 or 2 little support characters to try and give him some type of support. But really most of, if not all of your team is going to be just this 1 character. So of course it's going to be much easier for newer players to play a team with just 1 or 2 characters, where there's a lot less to keep track of and you can be much more focused in what you're trying to do. These type of teams can be a lot of fun to play, but they do have the drawback of being out-actioned very easily. And what I mean by out-actioned is if you only have 1 or 2 characters, you're only going to be able to do 1 or 2 things in a turn, whereas if you're playing against a more well-rounded tentpole type team, or even especially a swarm team that's going to have a lot more things to do in a turn, you might have a lot of trouble keeping up with your opponent and just getting out-actioned, whereas you're making 1 attack in a turn, they're attacking you 3 or 4 times in a turn. So even if they're missing half of their attacks, or their attacks aren't only doing 1 or 2 clicks of damage to you at a time, they're going to slowly wear you down much quicker than you might be able to, take them out 1 at a time. So these 3 types of teams have kind of a rock, paper, scissors type of dynamic to them. So a swarm team might have much better odds of defeating a one-man army type of team, but then if you're playing a one-man army type of team, you might have a better chance of defeating a tentpole type of team because you'll have a much easier time dealing with their main attacker, and then once he's down, you might be able to just clean up the rest of their support characters. And I would say a well-built tentpole style team does stand a better chance of defeating a swarm team, but that might involve a little bit more skill to be outplaying your opponent since they do have a lot more options available. Now my personal favorite type of team is really the tentpole style team. I do usually start with building like 1 good 100 to 150 point character and then look at what kind of cool secondary characters and support characters I can fit in around them. But I do love a good swarm team from time to time as well. Alright, so that's all the tips and tricks I have for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I hope you learned a thing or two. And please feel free to leave any questions you have for me in the comments, and I will do my best to answer those for you guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like for me. And if you guys like Heroclix or Heroclix related content, make sure you click that subscribe button. But until next time, this has been Heroclix Headquarters, signing off.